Here we are. That's right. Here we are, guys. This is one of my favorite days out of the month. This is the month of August, and today we are going to be doing some Q&A for the Patreon Club. If you have not already joined the Patreon Club, the days that we do these live sessions are the best days to join. Like, all the days are good days to join. I mean, it's always a good time. But the best day to join is today, because immediately after this session, everyone in the Breath Club is going to get together. Well, not everybody, because some of you will be sleeping. We've got a global community in the Breath Club on Patreon, and everyone has access to my full catalog of breathwork sessions. But in addition to that, every month we get together for a group breathwork session. So that is coming up at the next hour. Let's see, it's 2:00 Eastern. And so at 3:00 Eastern time, immediately after this broadcast, I will be switching over, and we're going to be doing some group breathwork. Today, the group breathwork is it's going to be a party. I'm just going to put it that way. Like, there's some days that we do things that are more what we might consider to be a real challenge, So, okay, let's really see how we can use our internal awareness and our breath and really dive into this, really minute, really specific area. Other times, we are doing some new styles, new techniques. Today, it is all out party. So I can't wait for this session. I did it this morning as my morning breath work. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you guys today. Anyway, so as a breath worker, this is something that I get a lot of questions. Today, actually, we're going to be doing a lot of questions about misconceptions about breath work. And a lot of these misconceptions have come from the history and the progression of breath work over the years. So I came into breath work when I would consider maybe to be like second generation breath work. A lot of the bigger names that you've heard of today would be what I would consider to be the second generation of breath work. And over time, I think a lot of these voices, while they were fantastic, they brought us a lot of things. We can now see that it's actually far more complex. Sometimes we, as human beings, we love to oversimplify. I believe in simplifying things, but there is an enormous amount of complexity in the human experience. And now that we have a far better understanding, we can start to cross-reference different elements of what we know about what it is to be a human, and we can start to become even more nuanced. We can learn the complexities, and we can do what we do with language of breath, and that is have a practice for every moment of every day, have a practice for your entire life. That is not just based in, well, I do this technique at this time and this technique at this time, and up, down, left, right, A, B. What is it, guys? You guys, it was Contra, wasn't it? Contra had the up, down, left, right. I forget. I didn't have a Nintendo when I was a kid. So I was the kid in the neighborhood who didn't have a Nintendo. My parents were like, dude, that's too expensive. We're not going to buy you one of those. So I had to wait until I'll never forget the year that Dana, you didn't have one either. So what happened with me, and I'm not complaining because I still eventually got a Nintendo. So I eventually got a Nintendo, the original NES, but it was, so the Super Nintendo came out, and that year the Nintendo prices, they just went down like crazy. And then that was the year I got a Nintendo for Christmas, and I was very thankful. I'm not complaining, but yeah, my parents waited until the next generation had already come in order for me to get a Nintendo. So I still had an enormous amount of fun. All the games were super cheap at that point because everybody else was playing the Super Nintendo. So I felt like that was a win. But as we learn new things, there's new generations of information, and there's new ways of looking at things. And that's something we're going to be talking about today with some misconceptions. You had the same instance, Dana. Okay. So the thing is, right, it was awesome though, because all my friends they had the Super Nintendo, like, I knew they had such and such game that I couldn't play. So I was like, hey man, you still have Final Fantasy 3? Or I don't know. I remember Final Fantasy 1 and 2, and then the first 3 Marios, And then what else was on? I mean, there was a ton of awesome games on Nintendo, like Excite Bike, Contra, right? I don't remember the up down. I remember the up down, left right, blah blah blah. Does anybody remember what it was? If you remember, even if you're watching this on the replay, put it down in the description or put it down in the comments. I mean, I've seen T-shirts with that on there. And actually, this leads me to one of the misconceptions of when it comes to breath work that we see a lot. And we see it still in the most prominent areas of people who are in breath work. We see it as a code that you put into your mind that will control your machine, which is your body. And this is a misconception that I would say most of second generation breath work, a lot of, I mean, I worked with that misconception for the longest time. And it wasn't until, I mean, years into my practice and I, research and looking at different areas other than just, breath work research. When you look at other areas of what it is to be a human and you're like, well, wait a minute, these things kind of fit together. And so that's why the language of breath exists. This is actually, let's see here. I have, take a look. So this is the book that's coming out in October, and it is on sale right now on Amazon, any place you want to go for pre-order. So that is Language of Breath. And if you're wondering, okay, Jesse, how is your breathwork philosophy different from everything else? Like, I literally had to write a book in order to put it down so that people will understand what it is. So there's great care that was taken in writing this. Forward by Brian McKenzie, afterward by Richie Bostock. Greats in the world of breathwork. It's been endorsed by by Jill Miller, by Patrick McEwen, by Chuck McGee, Scott Carney, Ben Greenfield. It's always kind of cool to look through here, but anyway, this book is coming out October 24th. Actually, we're going to be doing a challenge. We're going to do a free challenge for everybody that wants to join in. And this will be to kind of give everybody a good taste of what language of breath is all about, how it's different from XYZ technique or whatever this and, Wim Hof method or Sudarshan Kriya or Vivation or Oxygen Advantage, all of which, I don't have anything against, but when you learn new things and when things are, when there's a, when you really have something to say, you have to say it. And so the way we've been looking at ourselves, the way I looked at myself for the vast majority of my life was based on some misconceptions that just over time, we as human beings, we know better, but it's hard for us to get out of those ways of looking at ourselves. So anyway, we're going to talk about some of the questions I got today are based in misconceptions. One question though, that I got today, and this was not even a question. I want to start with this one though, because we're going to do some breath practice today. So let's do a little breathwork practice in this Patreon Q&A, because what I do is in the Patreon club, if you're in there, if you're at I think it's the silver or gold level, you get access to ask me anything you want. Like, I'll talk about whatever you want me to talk about. It can be breath work. It can be rodeo clowns. I don't have a whole lot to say about rodeo clowns, but if you wanted me to talk about rodeo clowns, we can do that. I'm going to have a little water to wet the whistle before we start. How are we doing, everybody? It's Thursday and I'm having a good day already. So basically, we've got a few different questions or topics that we're talking about. Let's see here. Bear with me. So Yusheta asks, she just wanted me to talk about the topic of breathing with humming. So humming is something that you're going to find in a lot of meditative traditions. It essentially, you can find humming in kind of the same family as chanting or even as singing, right? So what we're doing is we're making a tone while exhaling, right? So it's one of those things that, every time, you you speak, you say I love you, it's on an exhale, right? So so in order to speak, in order to make these tones, we're doing this on the exhale. So Ushetta just wanted me to talk about humming, and so let's talk about it, but also let's do it a little bit, okay? So humming is one of these things that people have noticed for thousands of years that causes a very calming effect. And what we're going to do, I'd like to just challenge you, if you're watching right now, we're going to do some humming together. And what I'd like you to do is we're going to go and we're going to see how long we can make 4 breaths. But the catch is on the exhale, we are going to hum for as long as we can hum. So you're going to inhale, you're going to absolutely fill your lungs absolutely full. And then we're going to exhale. I'm going to time how long I can do it. You guys may be able to go longer than me. I don't know. If not, don't worry about it. It is not a race. It's not a competition. We're just having a little bit of fun. But before you do that, okay, close your eyes, take a minute to just kind of check in with yourself. How do you feel right now? And you're going to scan yourself from head to toe. So for those of you guys who just joined us, we're about to do a humming experiment. But before we do this, it is essential to scan yourself so that you have some kind of a reference point to compare before, during, and after. Okay. So it's not just before and after. It's not just think about how you feel after. It's before, during, and after. I want you to be fully, as much as you possibly can, be aware of how you feel. Okay. That includes your emotions. That includes all of your senses. That includes aches and pains. That includes happinesses. That all the things that are going on because you are a human organism. Just become aware of that. Just try to become aware. Okay. All right. So what we'll do, and we'll start now, and I will time this. All right. We're going to inhale and exhale 4 times, but the exhale has to be the longest hum that you can do. All right. So I'm going to count down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Deep breath in. Exhale with a hum. Last one. That was about 2 minutes, 15 seconds. And so in about 2 minutes, 15 seconds, I just took 4 breaths, right? And so, okay, take a minute. How did you feel during? How do you feel now? And if you just joined us, we're talking about humming and breathing. How these things interact. Now, on a functional level, we can talk about things that you may already know about. And that is one, when we hum, we are lengthening our breaths. That's what we just naturally did right there, right? So in a normal minute, the average person usually is breathing between 10 to 20 breaths per minute. 10 to 20 breaths per minute, as opposed to over the course of what? I mean, almost 2.5 minutes, like 2:15. We only took four, or at least I only took four breaths, right? So one of the things we talk about in the language of breath is the Rosetta Stone of the language of breath. So quite literally, how do we decipher messages to our unconscious, right? So in the language of breath and on this channel, you're going to hear me talk a lot about the conscious and the unconscious self and how they interact. And ultimately, the language of breath is about bringing these parts together to work as a stronger team. Okay, it's not about control. Control is very illusory, and everyone's talking, oh, we got to control. It's not what that's about. It's about learning to work with that part of ourself. Now, in order to do that, we have to learn how to speak in the language of breath. We have to learn to speak in the language that the unconscious is going to understand. One of those things, one of the many things that the unconscious is listening for, is speed of breath. So when you're humming, just like when you're doing other things that can help lengthen your breath, you're slowing down your breath. And what does that mean? Well, it just means that you are lengthening the amount of time that the breath takes. And that is sending a message to the unconscious. It's saying, okay, and just think about this. When you are breathing fast versus when you're breathing slow, it's kind of it's a two-way type of a conduit. The autonomic nervous system is. So when you're afraid, when you're freaking out, when you're afraid and scared and stuff like that, are you breathing slow or are you breathing fast? Well, you're breathing fast, right? Typically, if you're afraid, if you're nervous, you naturally are going to breathe much faster. If you are relaxed, you're naturally going to breathe a lot slower. So when you see people incorporating humming into their practice, they're slowing down. So just simply slowing down your breathing is enough to send a message to the unconscious. And then the unconscious starts to believe that you're more safe, and it's going to make physiological changes, like simply by slowing down your breathing. But with humming, we're doing more than just that. We're not just slowing down our breathing, we're inhaling at a very quick pace. Well, if you notice, I inhaled, right? Nice and fast. And it wasn't slow on the inhale, it was slow on the exhale. Now, you may be familiar with you might have heard of polyvagal theory, maybe not. You might be familiar with the vagus nerve. So it's one of those sexy, hot words, one of those nerves that a lot of people know about, your 10th cranial nerve. It's connected to almost all of your bodily organs, and it is a nerve that is intimately connected to your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system, so your autonomic nervous system. Well, okay, so one of the things that I tell people, because I train first responders a lot, I train the military and things like that. So these people are under high levels of stress. They don't have time. They don't have time to sit there and hum. I mean, they might, but I mean, it may look weird if they're sitting there and humming. They don't have time to do a lot of, okay, now I'm going to do box breathing and I'm going to do super ventilation and I'm really going to clear myself out. They're in the moment. So one of the things I tell them a lot, especially whenever we're trying to shoot, especially when we're trying not to shoot, especially whenever we're driving, we're trying to make better decisions under great duress. Okay, lengthen your exhale, because what you're doing simply by lengthening the exhale, and that doesn't have to be with humming. You can lengthen the exhale like, right? I'm just simply lengthening the exhale. Okay, when you do that, that's another way to send a message to the unconscious via the autonomic nervous system. Hey, again, or actually, it's via the vagus nerve, which is then via the autonomic nervous system. We are safe, because you have to understand the conscious and unconscious connection that is you, right? You're not a machine. You're not a mind that drives around a body. There's a lot of misunderstandings about what we are as an organism that have led us to all kinds of problems and and this is the craziest thing. We don't want to find this out. People hate hearing about this because it's new information, and our unconscious doesn't like to have to rethink the paradigm. Once we're comfortable with a paradigm, no, it's a mind that drives around a body. I'm a machine. This is a computer. This is a machine. I control it. Once we have a paradigm that we're comfortable with, our unconscious is not always that open to accepting new information. But we understand now from decades of neuroscience and psychology that we are a singular organism. This is all one thing, and we are communicating within ourselves. We have a conscious and an unconscious self that are in constant interplay. And when we are doing breath work, that is ultimately what we're doing. We're speaking between these two parts of ourselves. So coming back to lengthening the exhale, we're stimulating the vagus nerve, and it's not this mechanical device. The thing is, this is not binary code. What we're doing is we're using the communication pathways that are within us to communicate between these two parts of ourselves. Now, I hope this isn't, I don't know, is it too complicated? It's not. I'm a big fan of Albert Einstein, who said, make everything as simple as possible, no simpler. Okay, so it's not as simple as you type in this code, it will spit this thing out, right? Because that's not how it works. What you're doing is you're stimulating parts of yourself that are messengers to the unconscious part of yourself. And by doing that, the unconscious is like, okay, now I'm going to take action, because that is what you are. You are an organism of action. You are not a machine. And so the unconscious says, okay, the action that's appropriate at this moment apparently isn't some kind of a danger reaction. Apparently it's not as threatening as I once thought, because I'm getting these signals that we're safe. So when we're humming, we're doing a few things. Okay, we're not even done yet. But I just want to review. So one of the things we're doing when we're humming, we're lengthening our breath. So we're slowing down our breathing, right? Another thing we're doing is we're lengthening our exhale. So if you were to slow down your breathing, but most of your breathing was an inhale, try it sometime. I mean, you can do that if you like, just like a long, slow inhale and a fast exhale. It's different. Okay, so it's not the same thing. You could do 4 breaths a minute and change the ratio of inhale to exhale. You're going to get different messages that you're sending to yourself. Okay, so we're lengthening the exhale, we're lengthening the length of breath, both of those things at the same time, sending 2 messages across to the unconscious saying, hey, we're safe, we can relax. Lastly, what we're also doing, a massage, really. We're stimulating the paranasal sinuses. So one of the things that you may have noticed whenever you felt the change whenever we were practicing, and I know I felt it, I don't know if you even saw it. I could see it. I could see my face getting red in the camera. It's insanely hot here in Indiana right now. I've got the air conditioner on, but it's not like blaring. So I'm trying to kind of like conserve energy. So it's not like crazy hot in here, but it's not 72 degrees. For those of you guys that are outside of the United States, it's not your typical room temperature. It's a little bit warmer in here. But at the same time, I got warmer because I was exhaling for longer and I was humming. Humming is going to stimulate the paranasal sinuses, which will ultimately release more nitric oxide into your blood. So nitric oxide is one of the chemical messengers that our unconscious self uses to relax blood vessels. So that's really cool. So this is a way, it's a chemical messenger that relaxes your blood cells. So your arteries, all your blood cells, it doesn't relax blood cells, relax blood vessels. So your blood vessels are opening up. You're getting better overall blood flow. Well, that makes a person feel warmer in many cases. So you're going to have this practice of, if you're using humming while doing breath work, especially while doing exhales. Well, I mean, obviously you're not going to do it. I guess you could try doing it through an inhale. If you can do inhales with a hum, record that, send that to me. I'd love to share that with the world. I'm not sure how how great that would be, but if you're doing that, that's fine. Anyway, so you're lengthening the exhale, you're lengthening the breath, so you're slowing down the breath, and you're sending a message to create more nitric oxide through your paranasal sinuses. All of these things lead you to relax more. And so you're going to find that we have discovered this. Human beings discovered this thousands of years ago. Wow, when I chant, when I hum, and those of you guys who are singers, right? You notice that when you sing, you also get some of these same reactions, right? You start to notice, man, when I sing, I really relax. Now, there's reasons for this in addition to what I just said. So one of those reasons is that we are also creating a beautiful sound, which is soothing, right? There's a certain degree of the unconscious is not just like, and again, you are not just some kind of a robot or a machine. You are a full organism, and this unconscious you is always paying attention. And there are times whenever it's very impressed, right? And that is you. I mean, it's not someone other than you, but it's just, man, that's beautiful. And when we hear something that's beautiful, when we recognize something that's beautiful, that also causes us to have a reaction. I don't know if you're listening, if you're watching today, and you're the type of person who maybe if you hear the perfect line of poetry, or you hear a person say something very true, or really is something that's absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. Maybe you hear someone singing, and maybe you don't even understand the language that they're singing in, but it's beautiful. You feel that, right? It's not just like, well, I intellectually, in my computer brain, I intellectually am analyzing the notes, and using the Mixolydian scale, I have determined that order, that sequence of notes is it is acceptable, right? You feel it. So that is where we are. There is a part of you that recognizes beauty. It recognizes something that you want to aspire to, that you want in your life, and it will change your physiology. Okay. And so people, and I mean, this is where music therapy comes into play, right? And so wait a minute, Jesse. We're talking about breath work. It's all connected. Like, this is where the next generation of breath worker has to be aware of this. This is what we express in the language of breath. It's not just, okay, the breath work is doing this thing, and there's other thing that's doing this thing, and everything is interconnected. You are an interconnected organism that is built for action, and that is to aspire to survive or thrive or move towards something good or move away from something bad. And all of that is happening all the time, and it's never not happening. So when we're humming, we're creating this beautiful sound. Maybe there's another sound in the background that you're chanting. Maybe it's this other sound. Maybe other people are in the room. When other people are humming together, if you've never been to a group breathwork session where people are humming, guys, you got to go do this. It's a beautiful thing. When we come together and we're humming together, we're doing these things together. Not only are you getting those signals that we were talking about already, slowing down the breathing, lengthening the exhale, paranasal sinuses are producing more nitric oxide. Now you're starting to get this other aspect that the unconscious you wants, and that is community. So we are built, and I don't know why. Language is interesting. We're built. It makes it sound like we're a machine, or we're this like a shed or something like that. But we are organisms that are intrinsically related. We are intrinsically interested in community. We understand that, and ultimately that's what made us the dominant creatures on this planet, is our ability to work together and come together as groups. And so there's so many things happening whenever you use humming with breath work. It's not just a mechanistic thing. It's the fact that your organism, the way that you are, this relationship that is you, is being spoken to in many ways when it comes to breath. It's being spoken to in chemical messengers. It's being spoken to in a way that oftentimes we might say, some emotional pathway, right? And that's ultimately what it is. There's a part of you that finds this to be very good and worthwhile. So, okay, thank you so much, Asheta. I wanted to give you a lot of time on this one because I know you've been asking for this for a while on humming, and I know you've been using humming in your practice for quite some time. So I really appreciate the question. The next one comes from Chris. He had two really good ones this time. I didn't get that many questions, although we have more members. So we have more members in this tier. So if you're in this tier and you don't, let's see here. I might have gotten a. Oh, let's see. I'm afraid I can't join today. Da, 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 da. Okay. All right. Yeah, I thought I got a question just now. Didn't get that one. Okay. So here is okay. So Chris asked a question. He kind of wrote a longer email to me. So I'll just read this. I'll just kind of go over it. So hey Jesse, I hope you're doing awesome today. I do have a question for the live stream. You may have already covered this, and if I missed it, feel free to edit it for brevity. So I'm not the brevity kind of guy. We're gonna get into it. This one has to do with cold training. This has to do with cold training and breath work. He said, what are your thoughts on breath work and cold exposure for those experiencing overreaching or overtraining syndrome? So, Chris, all right, I'm glad you're here, my friend. Let's see here. So on a personal level, I find myself in a state of overreaching or overtraining, engaging in practices such as superventilation, hypoxic training, and cold exposure seems to make matters worse and prolongs the recovery. On the one hand, it makes the sympathetic nervous system, let's see. Okay, he says, on the one hand, it makes sense as the sympathetic nervous system may be dominant when you're in this state. So doing sympathetic activating practices could exacerbate things. Yet we hear so much about the benefits of hypoxic training and cold exposure when it comes to reducing stress, inflammation, aiding recovery, etc. This could be, let's see here. This could be, this could lead to me to think that those practices would aid in recovery. I found this so challenging, sort of. Let's see. I found this challenging to sort out since I started dabbling with Wim Hof method, which seems to be problematic for me unless it's done in small doses. Am I overthinking overtraining? I love the question. He says, since delving into language of breath philosophy, I feel the answers are presenting themselves natively, but would love your thoughts on it. Sorry for the long-winded question. Do not worry about long-winded questions, my friend. Let's talk about this. So you're right. So Chris recently, he started delving into the language of breath. I think you've already finished the course that we have. We're actually updating it. So if you haven't already done the language of breath, or even if you have, so Yusheta, I know you've done the language of breath course as well. If you have done it, I'm updating the course. After doing an enormous amount of research and kind of thinking about how can I teach these principles a little bit more clearly and more concisely, I'm updating the course. So as of September 1st, I think there's like 3 weeks that were completely replaced. So it's not like the first iteration of the course was wrong. It's just that I'm like, okay, I think I can teach this better. I want to make sure, especially we're going to have challenge and things like that. And later on this year with the book, if you already have the course, you're going to get to take a journey with me whenever the book comes out, because I'm going to do live sessions for every single week of the course with everybody who has the course. All right. So if you already have the course, you have that to look forward to. That's a spoiler alert. I shouldn't tell everybody. But anyway, so you've taken the course, you understand how a lot of this, the way we look at things is based off of misconceptions. So you're talking about cold training, you're talking about superventilation and hypoxic training. So Wim Hof method is basically Bhastrika Kumbhaka pranayama, and it's slightly modified. Bhastrika usually has an active exhale. Wim Hof, he said, okay, let's do it with a passive exhale. That's the only difference. But it remains the same. Superventilation, hypoxic training, we are working with stressors. We're ramping up the nervous system, ramping up that sympathetic nervous system. So that's the part of ourselves that's there to put us into action, right? So it's kind of like, and really it's the same way with cold exposure training. These things are not, so there's a common misconception that because I feel calm and relaxed after I do these things, they must be things that are making me more relaxed. They must be things that are putting me into a parasympathetic state. And the reality is it's not really that way. The reality is that you have a you just like exercise. It's just like so many other things that put you into a sympathetic dominant state. You ramp up, and then afterwards you do feel relief. You feel some relaxing. You feel a lot of these things because we're typically chronically kind of at a 6 or a 7, and sometimes we really need to crank it up to 11. So when we do superventilation, when we do cold training, when we do a lot of these things, we are putting ourselves into a sympathetic dominant state. So one of the things that I like to compare it to is exercise. Exercise is probably it is the most researched health modality there is. We understand that exercise is good for you, right? And this is where the misconception always comes into play. Well, it's good for me. So if a little's good for me, I guess a lot's even better, right? And so this is where our misconception comes into play. So I want to do everything that's good for me. Well, we have to think about this. Why are these things, quote unquote, good for you? Well, in many of these cases, it is because it ramps up your sympathetic nervous system, which can be good in certain cases, but when done chronically and when done at levels of stress that you're already high stress, it can be to the detriment of your health. And I know the thing is, we love to oversimplify as human beings, and we love to say right now, hey, you know what? We've got these things that are, it's always, this is X equals this. This is always the result. And it's not really that case. So you have to learn how to listen to your unconscious. You have to learn how to listen to that voice that's speaking back. Am I chronically in a high state of stress? And should I do something that's more stressful than that? And should I continue that ramping up? The problem is that oftentimes we think we're overtraining whenever we really aren't. So it's sometimes difficult to discern that, whether that's actually what's happening or whether it's not what's happening. So my best advice to you, Chris, is there's, sadly enough, when it comes to cold exposure training, it's like so many things that are like hot now, pun intended. I don't know. Anyway, the point is, so much of these things are considered to be good in every way. They cure everything, that blah, blah, blah. And we're looking at these things there's some studies that would say these things are okay. These are some things that happen, but we're not looking at the context of these people's lives. And we don't know what was happening in their lives. Were they doing the things that you're doing? Were they going through the things that you're going through? And so you have to look at your life as a complete thing, as opposed to thinking that all of these practices, all of these things are going to always result in the way that it was in that study. Because in that study, it's kind of in a vacuum, right? They had the control group, they had the people that were the test subjects. It was in a vacuum. That's all there was. So, you have to make that judgment, and that's where you start to learn to listen. So the awareness exercise is one of the foundational exercises in the language of breath, and that's where it's really, really essential. You're going to do that awareness exercise and say, okay, why am I doing these things, right? And here it is. I'm still working on my cold training book. I'm updating the cold training book, and it's going to be coming out next year. I'm a proponent of cold training, but I don't cold train like I used to. I used to cold train every single day, and I was religious about it. And I felt like if I didn't, then I wasn't living my full life. And I would look at so many things in the wrong light. And now I look at it as, okay, we've got to look at these things in the context of exactly where you are in the moment, because that's the only context that your unconscious can look at it in. And your conscious self, you can say, well, what's going to happen tomorrow? What's happened yesterday? Am I recovering from a big workout? So that's the long answer. The short answer, I guess, is ultimately this. It's not always a good idea to do superventilative breath work. It's not always a good idea to take a cold shower or an ice bath. Sometimes it's a better idea to not take an ice bath. Oh, no, he said, what? A cold shower a day keeps the doctor away. It's not always that simple. You are not that simple. Life is not that simple. The human organism is not that simple. So you're not a machine. You're an organism, right? You're a relationship within yourself that is constantly in relationship with the world around you. So develop that relationship, right? If you're constantly being demanding on your partner and never letting that partner have a minute to recover or do what it's supposed to do, which is actually the recovering part, you're never going to get healthier. You're never going to feel better. Exercise is good for you, but you do need rest days now and then, right? So I think you already knew this, Chris, but I just want to make it clear to everybody else that's listening. I really do appreciate this question. So you do have to listen to yourself, listen to the unconscious you. Now, there are going to be times you have to understand the unconscious you is always trying to help you to survive and thrive. It's there to protect you from injury. So there will be times whenever it's actually better to go ahead and take that cold shower or to go ahead and do that whatever cold plunge or the health practice that you don't feel like doing, right? And that's where your conscious thinking self has to come into play. What have I been doing lately? How much stress have I been under? How many workouts have I been doing? Is this right for me? So it's always a balance between the conscious you and the unconscious you. So, Chris, thank you so much for that question. Guys, if you'd like to learn more about the language of breath philosophy, which is a complete philosophy of breath and self-awareness, not just a technique, it's not just not just some techniques, or it's not just biomechanics, it's not just philosophy of breath, it's all these things put together. This is coming out in October. You can pre-order today. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, all these places. Guys, in 20 minutes, I will see my friends in the Breath Tribe for our breath session, our group breath party. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't joined the Breath Club, take a look. Just go to patreon.com. Midwestern Method is where we are, and I'll see you in about 20 minutes.